My dear students, greetings to all of you. So in this session, fourth session of adenocorticosteroid hormones, we are going to discuss something about rest of the glucocorticoids. And fifth session, we'll be discussing something about mineralocorticoids and antagonists towards glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids as well. Okay, let us get into the subject. So adenocorticosteroid hormones, fourth session. So here we'll be discussing something about preparations, that is systemic and topical, and therapeutic uses, that is replacement therapy, pharmacological therapy, non-endocrine disorders, and diagnostic application. Then commonly used steroids, steroid withdrawal, how to do it, precautions, contraindications, drug interactions, and principles of therapy. Okay, so now coming to the preparations part, there are synthetic preparations apart from the natural preparations. They replace the natural compounds, highly potent and long acting when compared to the natural compounds, and they are more selective for glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid actions. So these synthetic glucocorticoids are rapidly absorbed orally, and their long-acting esters are used topically and for local injections. Intra-articular injections, when they are given, they are very poorly absorbed, but they do produce some pharmacological action, and they're metabolized by the liver, but more slowly. And the pharmacological actions in ADR are identical with those of hydrocortisone, except the mineralocorticoid actions. They're less extensively protein bound and hence diffuse more completely into the tissues as a free form. That is a general principle, of course. Then they are effective in smaller doses, but it doesn't mean that such smaller doses, however, should not be construed to give them any superiority over the older preparations, as in equivalent therapeutic doses, their adverse effects are similar. So we can't give them superior position of because of the smaller doses. ADR are same. Then the synthetic glucocorticoids that are normally used are prednisone, prednisolone, triamcinolone, which causes myopathy, and paramethazone, dexamethasone, betamethasone, 6-methylprednisone. The last four compounds, that is prednisolone, paramethazone, dexamethasone, betamethasone, and 6-methylprednisolone, they are devoid of mineralocorticoid activity. Then prednisone is converted into in the body to the active compound prednisolone. So prednisolone is a safer molecule among all the synthetic compounds with respect to peptic ulceration, osteoporosis, and hyperglycemia. But all of them are potent pituitary inhibitors. So this ADR, dreadful ADR, is not escaped. So they are not recommended for routine use because of this dreadful ADR. Then synthetic steroids that are used for systemic use are cortisone, that is available as tablet and intramuscular injection. Then hydrocortisone, available as tablet, IM, IV, and retention enema. Methylprednisolone as tablet form, IM, IV, and retention enema. And prednisolone tablet, IM, IV, intraocular, periarticular injection, retention enema, and pediatric drops. Then rancinoline tablet form, IM form, and intra-articular form. Then betamethasone and dexamethasone as tablet form, IM form, IV form. If you look at these things, all are available as tablet forms for oral administration, and these are available as IV forms, whereas only IM but not IV administration are cortisone and triamcinolone. Please keep this point in mind. Then orally administered corticosteroids are prednisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, triamcinolone, betamethasone, dexamethasone, and fludrocortisone. You have to remember these names, and I can't provide the mnemonic for each and every slide. Okay, try to remember that. It is in the order only. Then injectable corticosteroids are hydrocortisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, triamcinolone, betamethasone, and dexamethasone. And glucocorticoids that are used for topical administration are preparations with either glucocorticoids alone or in combination with antibiotics are available for topical therapy. The topical skin preparations can be divided into four groups in increasing order of potency. The potency of these preparations is proportional to their ability to cause vasoconstriction and cutaneous blanching on local application. So we have here, based on the order of potency, low, medium, high, and very high. hydrocortisone acetate, alclometazone dipropionate, and methylprednisolone acetate belong to low category. Clobetasone butyrate, hydrocortisone butyrate, and flucortolone pivalate belong to medium category. And then beclomethasone dipropionate, betamethasone dipropionate, betamethasone benzoate, betamethasone valerate, difluorocortisone valerate, and fluocinolone acetonide, fluticasone propionate, and then fluocinonide belong to high category. And then clobetasol propionate, difluorocortisone valerate, and halcinonide belong to very high category. Then the skin preparations are used most often as creams or ointments. And there are topical preparations which can be used for nasal, conjunctival, and intra-articular use also. Then beclomethasone dipropionate and budesonide and fluticasone are used as inhaled steroids for the management of bronchial asthma. And hydrocortisone 0.5% oral paste is used for painful oral non-herpetic ulcer management. These are also topical preparations. So overall, the topical preparations list is mild, moderate, potent. So this is what we have discussed in the other slide also. And available forms is given here, cream and ointment forms. Okay. Then the other topical steroids available are alclometazone, amsinonide, beclomethasone, clobetasol, clocortilone, desonide, dexamethasone, fluocinolone, fluticasone, and halcinonide. Then inhalational steroids which are available are beclomethasone, budesonide, flunisolide, and fluticasone. Then steroids which are used for ophthalmic purpose are fluoromethalone, and medrozone. Then routes of administration of corticosteroids in the eye. We have various routes of administration. This itself is a 4 marks question probably for you, or even you may get 2 marks question also. Apart from the topical therapy, topical corticosteroids that are used in the management of various infections. That is another short note for you. So topical, that means as eye drops or ointments, the drugs used are betamethasone, dexamethasone, and prednisolone. But medroxyprogesterone is used for the management of alkali burns of cornea. Then retrovalvular or periocular route of administration. Suspensions are used to sustain its effect for 4 to 8 weeks, and considerable concentrations are achieved in vitreous, optic nerve, and ovial tract. Then another route is intravitreal route used in endophthalmitis, prophylaxis of proliferative vitreoretinopathy. Then systemic route of administration is used in those ocular conditions which are a part of systemic autoimmune disorders. So we have various routes of administration into the eye regarding the steroids. So we have discussed this already in the introductory sessions, classification of glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, short acting, intermediate acting, long acting, hydrocortisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, then dexamethasone and betamethasone. Now we are going to discuss something about the dose. So this is the preparation: cortisone, hydrocortisone, 20 mg, 100 mg oral or IV. Intermediate acting prednisolone available as 5 to 60 mg per day oral IM, and methylprednisolone 4 to 32 mg oral IV. Oral or IV. Long acting preparations like dexamethasone 0.5 to 5 mg per day oral or IV or IM. Betamethasone 0.5 to 5 mg per day oral or IV or IM. The same thing. Okay. Then mineralocorticoids, the most common used preparation is deoxycortisone 2 to 5 mg once or twice weekly, sublingual or IM preparation. Whereas aldosterone is not used clinically. Then coming to therapeutic uses, so this preparation part itself is a 4 marks question. In adenocorticosteroid hormones, every part is equally important, whether you will get as essay question or short notes or very short notes. Okay. Then therapeutic uses. Except in patients receiving replacement therapy for adrenal insufficiency, glucocorticoids are neither specific nor curative. Only in replacement therapy, we are using them as curative drugs. Okay. In all the other conditions, they are used for palliative purpose because of their anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive actions. This point must be noted in the mind, because majority of the time they are used routinely for treating all the various sorts of diseases. So this is like abuse of the steroids that we have discussed and we will discuss at the end also. Then relative risk was benefits need to be taken care of. So here regarding just before going into the therapeutic uses, this part we have already discussed. Just I'm doing a recap of it. Single large dose therapy is harmless. Short therapy up to 1 week is harmless. More than a week, time and dose dependent side effects it can produce, and abrupt cessation after prolonged therapy can give rise to suppression of HPA axis adrenal insufficiency, which is a very fatal and dreadful area. So regarding the therapeutic uses, we have 4 types of uses. One is replacement therapy, pharmacological therapy, and then non-endocrine disorders, and then for diagnostic application. Let us see all those in detail. The therapeutic uses of glucocorticoids is also very important as a question for you. Then replacement therapy. So number 1 is adrenal insufficiency. It is again subdivided into acute adrenal insufficiency or primary adrenal insufficiency, which is due to Addison's disease, and secondary adrenal insufficiency. Regarding the acute adrenal insufficiency, that is Addison's disease, most often, the causes of acute adrenal insufficiency are disorder of the adrenal gland. Maybe it could be due to acute infection, injury, or adrenalectomy, or even abrupt withdrawal of glucocorticoids at high doses, or prolonged use of glucocorticoids also. All this can lead to adrenal insufficiency. Okay. Then the symptoms of primary adrenal insufficiency are GIT symptoms, dehydration. So whatever the glucocorticoids, whatever the pharmacological actions they produce, the opposite is adrenal insufficiency. Dehydration, hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, weakness and lethargy, hypotension, etc. So the management has to be done to restore the fluid balance along with hyponatremia. IV 5% dextrose is administered in normal saline and monitor for fluid overload. So there is a risk of pulmonary edema while restoring the fluid balance. Then administration, the drug of choice here is hydrocortisone because cortisol levels are reduced here. So 100 mg bolus followed by 100 mg every 8 hours. Then maintenance dose 10 mg TID with 9 alpha fluorohydrocortisone. Thereafter, same management with chronic adrenal insufficiency. Then correct volume depletion on dehydration. Hypoglycemia is to be treated with IV saline and glucose. Then correct infection and other precipitating causes. Then coming to the chronic adrenal insufficiency, which could be due to hypopituitarism or lesions of the hypothalamus. So primary or acute adrenal insufficiency, the problem lies within the adrenal gland, whereas chronic adrenal insufficiency, the problem lies either within the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland. The symptoms could be hyperpigmentation, weight loss, inability to maintain fasting blood sugar, weakness and fatigue, and hypotension. Again, the same symptoms only. The origin is different. And the management should be done with hydrocortisone 20 to 30 mg per day BID. So which can be divided into 2 doses to mimic the normal diurnal rhythm. So 20 plus 30, if you want to give 30 mg, you have to divide it into 20 plus 30. 20 should be given in the morning levels to mimic the diurnal rhythm, and 10 at the night time or afternoon. So along with that, 9 alpha fluorohydrocortisone acetate 0.1 to 0.2 mg per day is to be added. So it is a valuable indicator of adequate replacement. So disappearance of hyperpigmentation and resolution of electrolyte abnormalities could be seen with this administration. Then monitor plasma ACTH levels or measure urinary free cortisol, and dosage adjustments are needed for stress. So we need to check the levels also so that it will not go beyond a limit. Okay, then it is also used in the, these glucocorticoids are also used in the management of septic shock, apart from the adrenal insufficiencies, which are acute and chronic. So this is acute adrenal insufficiency, otherwise known as adrenal crisis, which can give rise to the symptoms like profound fatigue, dehydration, vascular collapse, renal shutdown, hyponatremia, and hyperkalemia. So here Addison's disease means chronic adrenal insufficiency, and even sometimes you can see the manifestations like bronch pigmentation of skin, hypoglycemia, postural hypotension, change in distribution of body hair, GI disturbances, weight loss, and weakness. Then congenital adrenal hyperplasia. In congenital, this is otherwise known as congenital virilizing adrenocortical hyperplasia. So here, the long-term treatment to be done with long-acting dexamethasone or betamethasone 0.5 mg at bedtime daily. So the problem with this condition is the mutation in CYP21, which causes 21 hydroxylation reaction. So enzyme required for biosynthesis of corticosteroids is deficient. That is 21 beta hydroxylase enzyme deficiency is there. So here you can see there is no cortisol. Cortisol deficiency is there like that of the acute and chronic adrenal insufficiency. But here the difference is adrenocorticotropic hormone levels are exaggerated, which give rise to adrenal hypertrophy. So because of this, there is increased androgen secretion also. And because along with that, there is loss of negative feedback control, which can give rise to rise in ACTH level further and further, giving rise to adrenal hypertrophy and increased androgen secretion, because of which it is known as virilizing hypertrophy. The long-acting compounds such as dexamethasone are eminently suited for uniform and continuous suppression of ACTH secretion. As a peak secretion of ACTH occurs at night, in this condition, as in normal persons, the entire daily dose of long-acting glucocorticoid should be given at bedtime. So this is mimicking like that of the diurnal variation. Peak levels occurs at night. So if you want to suppress the secretion, long-acting glucocorticoid should be administered at bedtime. Then it is again subdivided into two types, that is classic CAH, which is seen in childhood, manifests as female pseudohermaphroditism and male precocious puberty, and salt busters with cardiovascular collapse secondary to volume depletion also could be seen. The non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is seen after puberty, that is before puberty in childhood, this is after puberty, with androgen excess. So which can manifest symptoms like hirsutism, amenorrhea, infertility, acne, etc. Linear growth is accelerated in childhood, but adult height is reduced because of premature closure of epiphysis. So the treatment is to be done with oral hydrocortisone and 0.6 mg per kg daily in 2 or 3 divided doses. Okay. Then fludrocortisone acetate 0.05 to 0.2 mg per day to prevent continued ACTH-induced adrenal hyperplasia. So these are the two molecules that can be given here. And because it is congenital, while the baby is being in the womb, treatment in utero could be done with dexamethasone administration, 20 grams per kg orally daily by mothers at risk, therefore before 10 weeks of gestation, followed by genotyping and sex determination, so that any virilizing manifestations are there or not to see the baby. So replacement therapy, acute adrenal insufficiency, chronic adrenal insufficiency, and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Hydrocortisone is to be administered everywhere. This is because acute IV first as a bolus injection and then infusion along with isotonic saline and glucose solutions. Chronic means it is oral administration is sufficient. Commonly used drug is hydrocortisone with adequate salt and water allowance. And here congenital is very low dose, 0.6 milligrams per kg daily in divided doses round the clock. Then pharmacological therapy after the replacement therapy. So here we have various sorts of therapies pharmacologically whenever we want to administer glucocorticoids in the management of various disorders. Like number one is pulse therapy, which is used in the management of graft rejection, graft ophthalmos, rheumatoid arthritis, and SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus. So methylprednisolone 150 to 300 mg IV OD is used for 3 days. So the most common ADR is cardiac arrhythmias. High-dose oral prednisone is combined with oral immunosuppressive and immunomodulatory drugs to prevent relapses. Then intensive short-term therapy. It is life-saving, which can be used in the management of emergency situations like it is intensive but very short-term therapy. So life-saving. Anaphylactic shock, status asthmaticus, acute circulatory collapse and response due to pressure remains, acute necrotizing vasculitis, water intoxication, central hyperthermia, acute hypercalcemia accompanying vitamin D intoxication or hormone therapy of metastatic breast cancer. So heavy dose prednisolone administration 100 to 200 mg 8 hourly can be used here. But the most common area that could come across are burning and itching at mucocutaneous junction, ventricular premature beats, Precipitation of ketoacidotic diabetic coma and acute erosive gastritis with hemorrhage, same like that of the glucocorticoid administration. Then prolonged high dose suppressive therapy, which is used in some chronic diseases like acute rheumatic fever, celiac disease, ulcerative colitis, hepatitis, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, acute hemographic rejection, ALL, Hodgkin's lymphoma, nephrotic syndrome, pemphigus vulgaris, collagen diseases like vasculitis and SLE. So here we can administer prednisolone 100 to 200 mg per day for 10 days, prolonged. This is high dose, but prolonged administration also, followed by 15 mg per day as maintenance dose. Here, alternate day regimen is preferred after stabilization to prevent suppression of HPA axis, which we have discussed already in the earlier session, third session. So because prolonged high dose suppressive therapy has always a risk of suppression of HPA axis, alternate day therapy is advisable once the disease is stabilized. So what are the advantages of alternate day therapy? We have various therapies, that is like pharmacological therapy, that itself is a short note for you. And alternate day therapy advantages is 2 marks question, very, very important. And it is every point is equally important for Viva OC, of course. So advantages with alternate day therapy are duration of response continues even after steroid levels fall. So even if you skip 1 day between, so today you are administering the dose, tomorrow you are skipping, and then day after tomorrow you are giving the dose. So still the steroid levels fall on the day which you don't administer because it is alternate day therapy. But still the duration of response continues. So side effects can be minimized, but effects can be sustained by. This is the main advantage. But here the long-acting steroids are not useful because of the dreadful side effects. And they're safer to administer, no suppression of HPA axis. That is the main advantage of this alternate day therapy. Less calcium and nitrogen imbalance also can be seen, but it is used only for maintenance therapy, not for initiating the therapy. Okay. Then low dose chronic palliative therapy, wherein we go for small dose of prednisolone 2 to 10 milligrams per day in rheumatoid arthritis as an adjunct to NSAIDs. So it is here alternate day therapy is ineffective because we are using very low dose, because it cannot control the symptoms if we skip the days in between with such low dose. Okay. So raise the dose by 2 to 4 times in stressful situations like surgery or severe infections, any kind of stress, major stress. Then lifelong treatment is to be done with such a mild dose under supervision, of course, because glucocorticoids always produce some other area. Then topical therapy. I have already mentioned that topical steroid therapy itself is a very, very, very important short note for you, which we have discussed a part in therapeutic uses. And we are discussing now a part in therapeutic uses, and we have already discussed a part in the earlier session also. Okay. So ocular conditions where we go for a topical steroid therapy are interstitial keratitis, clippertonor or conjunctivitis, spring cataract, iritis, iridocyclitis, posterior uveitis, and sympathetic ophthalmia need systemic medication. Dermatosis, another condition apart from the ocular disorders, where we go for steroid topical administration. That is like inflammatory dermatosis, exacerbation of psoriatic eczema, and psoriasis. But it is not at all recommended for urticaria. Remember, it is absolute contraindication for that. But the thing is that topical therapy of steroids is majority of the times irrational. Why? Because unfortunately, steroid ointments are misused as a dermatological panacea because they give dramatic relief in inflammatory and psoriatic skin conditions. The discriminate use is not only wasteful but also harmful also, because they do produce topical area as well as systemic absorption. After getting systemic absorption, they do produce systemic ADR also. So they are not only wasteful but also harmful. This irrational topical therapy is also a very, very important 2 marks question for you. Then the practice of adding a glucocorticoid to antibiotics and antifungal agents is difficult to justify. Routinely, the majority of the clinicians do this mistake. Then the same is true of use of glucocorticoids in ointments for hemorrhoids is given, which is not at all advisable. Then application of steroid ointment for herpes simplex, herpes zoster, ringworm infection, and impetigo to exacerbation of the disease. It is absolute contraindication of topical steroids. These are the conditions where we should never use topical steroids because they may exacerbate the disease. And then glucocorticoids accelerate the fungal growth and cause local skin atrophy with resultant telangiectasia, purpura, and striae. This is also absolute contraindication. Systemic toxicity, including adrenal suppression, can occur in infants with local therapy. Whenever we go for the administration of steroids like potent and long-acting steroids like betamethasone, triamcinolone, fluocinolone, and clobetasol for management of infantile eczema, which is highly to be abandoned. Then potent steroids also should not be applied on facial skin for the risk of atrophy and telangiectasia on face. This point we have discussed already in the earlier session. Then other mode is intra-articular and intratendinous use. This is another mode of pharmacological therapy. So here long-acting esters of glucocorticoid steroids are used mostly in painful osteoarthritis and painful facial nodules by local infiltration. But the maximum 3 injections only can be given per year. So that point has to be kept in mind. It produces minimal systemic toxicity because it is a local injection. We are not giving systemically. Okay. Then coming to the non-endocrine disorders where we can use the glucocorticoid steroids are, number one, rheumatic disorders. Non-endocrine disorders means the diseases that don't directly involve the HPA axis, but we do prescribe glucocorticoids here. So here rheumatic disorders like SLE, polyarteritis nodosa, and vaginous granulomatosis. Prednisolone or prednisone is given 1 mg per kg per day in divided doses for alternate day therapy, along with immunosuppressants like cyclophosphamide and methotrexate for better long-term control. Then for rheumatoid arthritis, 5 to 10 mg prednisone per day is administered, and it can be even intra-articular injections of 5 to 10 mg triamcinolone acetate. For osteoarthritis, local injections of prednisolone once in 3 months to avoid painless joint destruction. That is for maximum 3 injections. There is once in 3 months only. So maximum 4 injections only we can go for a year. Then renal diseases like nephrotic syndrome, prednisone 1 to 2 milligrams per kg for 6 weeks along with azathioprine or cyclophosphamide can be given. Then allergic diseases, primarily anaphylaxis. Here epinephrine is sufficient for the management of anaphylaxis in the initial stages or less severe cases. 0.5 ml of 1 in 1000 solution either intramuscularly or subcutaneous route. So in less severe cases, antihistaminics are sufficient, and allergic rhinitis cases, intranasal steroids are sufficient like budesonide. In severe cases, methylprednisolone 125 milligrams IV 6 hourly or hydrocortisone 200 to 300 mg IV can be given. But anaphylactic manifestations, epinephrine can be combined with glucocorticoids, which also produce delayed action, which suppress the delayed manifestations of anaphylaxis. Okay. Then steroids can't be the mainstay of therapy in anaphylaxis because of the delayed onset of action. So they are used as adjuncts after initial treatment with epinephrine. So when you are asked in viva voce which drug has to be given first, so there is a drug of choice is epinephrine for anaphylaxis, but steroids are used as adjunct drugs only to suppress the manifestations. Then glucocorticoids can supplement primary therapy to suppress manifestations of allergic diseases also. Then coming to the bronchial asthma, 60 to 120 milligrams methylprednisolone 6 hourly, followed by 30 to 60 milligrams prednisone orally. Moderately severe asthma in children, theophylline is replaced. Previously, theophylline was used. Now it is replaced by inhaled glucocorticoids for the risk of behavioral toxicity with the theophylline molecule. So inhaled glucocorticoids like beclomethasone, dipropionate, budesonide, fluticasone, mometasone, and triamcinolone can be used in the moderate severe asthma in case of children. Okay. Then ADR with these molecules is most commonly oropharyngeal candidiasis apart from dysphonia. So this oropharyngeal candidiasis can be prevented or risk can be reduced by using spacers with this inhalational steroids and mouth rinsing frequently immediately after the inhalation. Then another mode is using corticosteroids with low oral bioavailability like beclomethasone dipropionate or cyclizonide, which are inactive compounds that are activated on site by lung esterases. Okay. Then coming to the management of infectious diseases like AIDS patients with pneumocystis carinii, pneumonia with severe hypoxia. Here, glucocorticoids increase the oxygenation and decrease the respiratory failure and mortality. Then, in case of Haemophilus influenza B induced meningitis in infants, glucocorticoids decrease neurological impairment. Then, role of glucocorticoids in ocular diseases. This is very, very, very important short. We have discussed this in our pharmacological actions also and ADR also. So, diseases of just like that of topical therapy, role of glucocorticoids in ocular diseases, and the question format may be like role of glucocorticoids in as immunosuppressants, role of glucocorticoids in inflammatory disorders, role of glucocorticoids in bronchial asthma and topical steroid therapy, and role of glucocorticoids in ocular disease. Like that, they may ask the questions. Then diseases of outer eye and anterior segment, they require topical administration. That is simply enough. Like the conditions like allergic conjunctivitis, iritis, iridocyclitis, keratitis. So here we can give dexamethasone sodium phosphate 0.1% drops or ointment. Then when we go to the diseases of the posterior segment, we need to go for intraocular injection or systemic administration of prednisolone. Okay, oral administration is enough for the then, but the risk of glaucoma is present and contraindications are, as we discussed already, bacterial, viral, and fungal conjunctivitis, herpes simplex keratitis, and mechanical lacerations and abrasions of the eye because of the risk of spread of infection and delay wound healing. So this is, you can see corticosteroid-induced uveitis. So the patient complains here of pain, photophobia, blurred vision, and prelimbal or ciliary hyperemia, and anterior chamber cells with a flare reaction. Okay, so it's so dangerous to give steroids everywhere, wherever we feel like. Then coming to the skin diseases, it is like a skin is the largest application of steroid therapy. Routinely, whenever a patient complains of some other skin manifestations, some of the clinicians they go for the ointments which contain steroids, which is not at all advisable. Sometimes they do produce systemic toxicity also. Eczema. So 1% hydrocortisone ointment can be given. Occlusive dressings, they enhance the toxicity along with the efficacy that we have mentioned already. Then pemphigus vulgaris, 120 milligrams prednisone per day can be given. Then GIT diseases, they are used in the management of inflammatory bowel disease, chronic ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease. Mild cases, hydrocortisone 100 milligrams retention enema can be given. Then moderate cases, oral prednisone 10 to 30 milligrams per day. Severe cases, oral prednisone 40 to 60 milligrams per day. Oral budesonide delayed release capsules also can be given, which facilitate drug delivery to ileum and ascending colon. Budesonide retention enema for ulcerative colitis. So budesonide, we have several dosage forms. Here we can see delayed release capsule and retention enema also. We have discussed that in preparations. So you can just check it back once again. Then hepatic diseases, like in case of autoimmune hepatitis, 40 to 60 mg prednisolone can be used. In severe hepatic diseases, prednisolone should be used instead of prednisone because prednisone requires hepatic conversion to be active, which is deficient here in hepatic diseases. So directly we can go for the administration of prednisolone. Then premature labor between 26 to 34 weeks of gestation. So here fetal cortisol helps in fetal lung maturation. So if we go for betamethasone 12 milligrams IMOD, only 2 doses, or dexamethasone 6 mg IDBD for only 4 doses. There is a possibility of decreased risk of respiratory distress syndrome, IV hemorrhage, and death in infants. So only single dose can be given to avoid the risk of low birth weight and adrenal suppression in case of premature labor to the mothers. Then other diseases, malignancies like ALL and lymphomas due to their anti-lymphotic effect of glucocorticoids. Then cerebral edema associated with parasites and metastatic neoplasms, sarcoidosis 10 to 20 milligrams prednisone. Idiopathic thrombocytopenia, it is used prednisone. Hemolytic anemia, again prednisone. If you don't remember the doses for these miscellaneous diseases, you can just write down the molecule which is used, prednisone. And organ transplantation, high dose prednisone 50 to 100 mg along with other immunosuppressants at the time of surgery. Then acute spinal cord injury, large doses of methylprednisolone sodium succinate, which inhibits the free radical mediated cellular injury following ischemia. Then other conditions where glucocorticoids can be administered are septic shock, thyroid storm, antiemetic along with ondansetron, acute mountain sickness, aspiration pneumonia, and pulmonary edema from drowning. So in a nutshell, the therapeutic uses here are allergic reactions like angioneurotic edema, asthma, bee stings, contact dermatitis, drug reactions, allergic rhinitis, serum thickness, and urticaria. Urticaria we don't use, of course. Collagen vascular disorders like genital arteritis, lupus erythematosus, mixed connective tissue syndrome, polymyositis, polymyalgia rheumatica, rheumatoid arthritis, and temporal arthritis. Eye diseases like acute uveitis, allergic conjunctivitis, choroiditis, optic neuritis, GI diseases like IBD, and hepatic necrosis through celiac disease, etc. Hematologic disorders like hemolytic anemia, acute allergic purpura, leukemia, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, multiple myeloma, etc. Then systemic inflammation like acute respiratory distress syndrome. Then infections like gram-negative septicemia. Then inflammatory conditions of bones and joints like arthritis, bursitis, and tenosynovitis. Neurological disorders like cerebral edema, and then organ transplantation reactions, also rejections, also to suppress that. Then pulmonary diseases like aspiration pneumonia, bronchial asthma, prevention of infant respiratory distress syndrome, and sarcoidosis. Renal diseases like nephrotic syndrome, skin diseases like atopic dermatitis, dermatosis, lichen simplex, and then mycosis fungoides with careful precaution, pemphigus, seborrheic dermatitis, cirrhosis, etc. Thyroid disease like malignant exophthalmos because they are going to reduce the TSH levels. Subacute thyroiditis also, miscellaneous conditions like hypercalcemia and mountain sickness. So this is all about the other pharmacological therapy. Then coming to the diagnostic application. So dexamethasone suppression test. It is used for diagnosis of Cushing syndrome. So what do we do here with glucocorticoids? The long-acting and potent dexamethasone is administered 1 milligram orally at 11 p.m. in the night, and sample is obtained. Blood sample is obtained at 8 a.m. If the blood sample shows cortisol level less than 3 mg per deciliter, it is a normal. That means HPA axis is intact because you are administering dexamethasone. Then again, negative feedback is there. So cortisol level is normal. I mean reduced. So it is normal. HPA axis is working. If cortisol level is more than 5 milligrams per deciliter, that means HPA axis is not working. It could be because of failure of suppression of cortisol, could be hypersecretion of ACTH by pituitary tumor. So no feedback. So ACTH secretion, hypersecretion is there by pituitary tumor, which is going to give rise to the enhanced cortisol secretion, or hypersecretion of cortisol itself by adrenal tumor itself. So these are two probables. One origin is adrenal tumor and another origin is a pituitary tumor. Both of are going to give rise to enhanced cortisol levels. Okay. Then the cause of hyperadrenalism could be non-specific due to obesity or stress or even Cushing syndrome. So here 2 milligrams dexamethasone every 6 hours for 8 doses to diagnose the cause can be given. Then hypercortisolism also could be due to Cushing's disease because of excess ACTH. Cushing's syndrome, which is because of excess cortisol. There is a difference. Disease means ACTH excess. Syndrome means excess cortisol. Adrenocorticotropical carcinomas, ectopic ACTH or CRH producing tumors. So the treatment here is surgery or adjuvant therapy with inhibitors of steroidogenesis because excessive secretion is there. Okay. Then commonly used steroids. So till now we have discussed various therapeutic uses. So in all these conditions, so we have discussed just now that various steroids preparations are used, which we have discussed the preparations of steroids in the beginning of this session. So we will go into the details of those specific steroids which are commonly used. So the most commonly used glucocorticoids are hydrocortisone, prednisolone, non-fluorinated prednisolones like methylprednisolone, fluorinated prednisolones like betamethasone, dexamethasone, triamcinolone. So here, usually in majority of all the clinical purposes, synthetic glucocorticoids are used because they have high affinity for the receptor with little or no salt retaining property. That is the main advantage why we go for synthetic steroids, which we have already discussed in the beginning of the session. Little or no salt retaining property, so no such sort of ADR connected to salt retaining property. So hydrocortisone to start with, most commonly used molecule. Prodrug cortisone is getting converted to hydrocortisone. Orally, it is used for replacement therapy. And then various preparations that we can see, you need to remember all these things because it is most commonly used molecule. Hydrocortisone acetate is used for IM injection and intraarticular administration. Hydrocortisone hemisuccinate is used for IV administration for shock and bronchial asthma. Hydrocortisone sodium succinate is used locally for soft tissue inflammation like fasciitis and also as enema in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So we have preparations like acetate, hemisuccinate, and sodium succinate. So routes of administrations are different with each and every dosage form. Then topically, as hydrocortisone ointment is used for the management of eczema and intra-articular hydrocortisone for osteoarthritis. It is a rapidly acting molecule which has mineralocorticoid action somehow. Then uses are emergencies like status asthmaticus, IV administration, acute adrenal insufficiency and shock, where we can go ahead with 100 mg IV bolus followed by IV infusion of 100 mg 8 hours. Then coming to the prednisolone molecule, prodrug prednisone is converted to prednisolone. It is also having mineralocorticoid action. Most widely used drug like that of the hydrocortisone. Then we have the preparations like oral or IM. Then this molecule is used in the management of allergic, inflammatory, and autoimmune diseases, lymphoma, leukemia, and multiple myeloma. Then intra-articular administration is used in the management of osteoarthritis. Topical administration for ocular and dermatological conditions. The dose to be given is 10 to 60 milligrams orally, 10 to 40 milligrams intramuscularly or intra-articular administration. Then methylprednisolone, which is to be given oral or parenteral or even topical. This is the molecule which is mainly used in pulse therapy, which we have discussed in the first step of pharmacological therapy. So it is used in the management of rheumatoid arthritis, acute graft rejection, necrotizing glomerulonephritis, and pemphigus. Okay, the dose to be given is 1 to 1.5 grams per day IV infusion for 3 days, repeated every 1 to 2 months. So because this molecule has minimal HPA axis suppression, it is widely prescribed. It is also used as retention enema in ulcerative colitis. The dose to be given is 4 to 32 milligrams oral administration or even retention enema also, either of the case. Then triamcinolone. This molecule is also having negligible mineralocorticoid action. So we need to keep in mind what are the glucocorticoid molecules which have negligible mineralocorticoid action or no mineralocorticoid action at all, so that whenever the indications and the necessity arises, we can choose those molecules. It is used in severe asthma, intraocular injection for joint inflammations, and other routes of administration are oral, IM, or topical administration. Then betamethasone and dexamethasone, very potent, highly selective, and long-acting preparations. They do produce significant suppression of HPA axis. So they are not routinely prescribed, but they don't have any salt retaining property. This is advantage and that is disadvantage. So routes of administration are oral, IM, or IV, or topical administration, useful for high dose therapies in cerebral edema. Then beclomethasone and budesonide are used. Topical administration for eczema, aerosol administration for asthma. Then fludrocortisone. It has significant mineralocorticoid activity. It is used in the management of replacement therapy in Addison's disease and congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and also idiopathic postural hypotension and interstitial nephritis. Then deflazacort, it is a novel drug with no mineralocorticoid action. Advantages of this molecule is less risk of osteoporosis, less growth retardation in children, less risk of hyperglycemia and Cushing's syndrome as well. So it is used in the management of inflammatory conditions and also autoimmune diseases. novel drug. Then coming to the steroid withdrawal. So till now we have discussed pharmacological actions, apart from mechanism of action, pharmacological actions, ADR, therapeutic uses and preparations. So when you keep the patient on steroids, we can't just immediately take away the steroids. We need to withdrawal or taper the dose of the drugs. So we'll see how to taper the dose of the steroids when we keep a patient on steroids. So steroid withdrawal, too rapid reduction of long-term therapy. What will happen if we do that? There is a possibility of flare-up of the disease symptoms that can give rise to acute adrenal insufficiency or HPA axis suppression all of a sudden, or even withdrawal symptoms can flare up. Then, so because of that, reduce the dose slowly to physiological maintenance dose and continue for 1 year to allow the complete recovery of HPA axis. This point we have already discussed. Because it takes almost 1 year for the HPA axis to recover when we abruptly stop the drug. So, stressful situation during this period can be covered by large doses of glucocorticoid to prevent acute adrenal crisis. So, steroids requiring tapering of the dose are prednisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, triamcinolone. So the principle is the longer the duration of therapy, more than 2 weeks, slower must be the withdrawal. Slowly we have to withdraw drugs. If it crosses the duration, if the duration of the treatment crosses beyond 2 weeks, we have to slowly withdraw the drug. Then withdrawal symptoms. If all of a sudden, if we withdraw, the patient may complain of withdrawal symptoms. What are they? Let us see. So the manifestations can be like fever, malaise, myalgia, arthralgia, rhinitis, conjunctivitis, itchy skin nodules, etc. So how to withdraw? Slow withdrawal means how should we do? Let us see. This is for clinical application that I'm just mentioning this particular aspect of steroids. So divide each daily dose into morning and afternoon portion. Suppose if you want to administer a particular steroid, 20 milligrams total dose that day, per day. So 20 milligrams dose is to be divided 10 mg morning dose and 10 mg afternoon dose. Divided it into equal halves. So begin reducing the afternoon dose first while maintaining the morning dose at the same level. So reduce the afternoon dose. Begin to reduce the afternoon dose by 2.5 mg every 7 days. So for 1 week, you are going to give 10 mg in the afternoon also. Morning, it will be 10 mg only. Reduce by 2.5 mg once in week. When the afternoon dose becomes 0, when you start reducing 1 week 2.5 mg, next week 2.5 mg, like that, it becomes 0 on 1 day. Then reduce the morning dose of 10 mg into half again to administer 5 mg in the morning and 5 mg in the afternoon. Then after that, now again reduce the afternoon dose by that. Now we have 5 mg in the morning, 5 mg in the afternoon. So that afternoon dose, morning dose has to be kept same only. That afternoon dose of 5 mg has to be reduced by 2.5 mg every 7 days until it becomes 0. So now what we are left with, morning 5 mg. So upon reaching 5 mg per day administration, divide that 5 mg dose in the morning into 2.5 mg in the morning, again 2.5 mg in the afternoon. So this afternoon dose of 2.5 mg reduce the dose slowly by 0.5 mg at a time in a week. Previously, it was like 2.5 mg by 2.5 mg. Now it is by 0.5 mg. When the afternoon dose comes to 0 again now, split the morning dose to half again and continue decreasing the afternoon dose of 0.5 mg as symptoms alone. So by the time you are reducing like up to the level of 0.5 mg and then further down, so repeat the process until the afternoon dose becomes 0 and then again halving the morning dose and all that. So at this point, what happens? Adrenal glands get adjusted. So it will start itself producing the natural cortisol. Because as prednisolone is no longer providing enough corticosteroid to keep the body function properly. So the endogenous secretion of cortisol is started. So when you taper at that lower level, there is no possibility of, there is no problem of HPA axis suppression or withdrawal reactions. Then coming to the precautions, before starting therapy, all the ADR that whatever we have come across, like check for hypertension, diabetes mellitus, septic ulcer, TB infection, etc. While stopping therapy, taper the dose gradually. That is the only precaution that we need to take care of. But during therapy, So when you go back to the pharmacological actions and ADR, with food diet low in sodium and calories, high in potassium because of the loss. Then check for weight gain, edema, hypertension, same like that of the ADR. Hypertension, hyperglycemia, infection, GI bleeding, hypokalemia, ocular changes. Monitor linear growth in children. Oral calcium or vitamin D supplements can be given along with alendronate and antacids H2 receptor blockers administration. Increase the dose of glucocorticoids in case of stress, and then not to stop abruptly. Then coming to the contraindications, absolute contraindications are like hypersensitivity, Cushing syndrome, herpes ocular infection. Relative contraindications are on the ADR that we come across. Peptic ulcer, diabetes mellitus, CHF, hypertension, renal failure, osteoporosis, TB, viral and fungal infections, psychosis, epilepsy, cataract, pregnancy, etc. Then drug interactions. Estrogens, that decrease metabolism, steroids, and same is the case with erythromycin, cyclosporine, isoniazid, and ketoconazole. Then phenobarbital, phenytoin, and rifampicin increase the metabolism, steroids being the enzyme induces, and they also cause digitalis toxicity, steroids, and steroids enhance diuretic action. Then coming to the principles of therapy finally. So the corticosteroids play an important role in control of pain and inflammation associated with various diseases, producing various adverse reactions. So currently they are used as drugs with broad spectrum of clinical utility, but they should never be used as substituents to other treatments because they are not the drug of choice. They are used only for palliative purpose only because they only control or relieve the symptoms but not cure the disease. Topical or local therapy is preferred, first of all, whenever possible. Topical or local therapy. And if it is still, you need systemic therapy, then you can go ahead with prednisolone, which is best, safest drug. And if at all potent corticosteroid is advisable, then you can go for then only in preferable conditions. Whenever it is damn needed, then you can go for betamethasone and dexamethasone. Then minimal dose is used to achieve the desired effect. Then of course, benefit versus risk ratio should be the major consideration. Then once in a daily dose is preferred for oral glucocorticoids. Large dose is administered if at all, if it is needed. You have to divide the doses like morning and afternoon like that to reduce ADR. In order to mimic the normal diurnal cycle and to reduce the risk of adrenal suppression, glucocorticoids should be given in the morning between 6 to 10 a.m. because of the diurnal rhythm that we have to maintain like that with the exogenous administration also. And the last one, that is alternate day therapy, allows the HPA axis to recover on off days. Whenever the drug is not there, that time the drug effect continues, no ADR are there, HPA axis slowly start recovering on off days. This is very, very important point. So with this, we have finished the fourth session, that is like preparations, therapeutic uses, various sorts of 4 types of therapeutic uses, and the most commonly used steroids, and precautions, contraindications, and drug interactions, and then choice of therapy, like principles of therapy, that how should you pick up a particular steroid, what are the principles that you have to go ahead with, principles of therapy of steroids. So with this, the 4th session is completed, and if you have any queries, then you can get back to me. Then we will discuss the final session about the mineralocorticoids and antagonist drugs like glucocorticoid antagonists and mineralocorticoid antagonists, which is very simple topic along with the questionnaire. Okay, thank you, one and all.